right, guys, we do have a major NFL playoff update. We've got brand new scenarios. We've got new seeds here as most of these teams are officially done with week 14, although kind of a weird two-game doubleheader tonight. I guess you can't call it a doubleheader considering both games are happening at the same time. But either way, taking a look at the playoff picture right now in the AFC, you do have Baltimore sitting at 10-3. They do have that first round bye right now. Miami very likely to win tonight, you would expect, sitting about 14-point favorites against Tennessee. Both Baltimore and Miami should be in a tie for first place, and I believe they should also be in a tie for best conference record because Baltimore beat the Rams this week. The Rams are not in the AFC. If Miami beats Tennessee, they would have the same conference record. So they would be basically tied first place dead heat, and you would have to go to another tiebreaker for that. But I'm guessing that's going to be solved at some point. But right now, you do have Miami as the number 2 overall seed. Kansas City still sitting as the number 3 overall seed. The AFC West, not great this year. Patrick Mahomes kind of had a meltdown at the end of the game, but they still are sitting at the 3 seed. And then you do have Jacksonville sitting at the number 4 seed. They lost to the Browns. That's who's the number 5 seed right now, the Cleveland Browns at 8-5. Joe Flacco seemingly playing a little bit better, even with Trevor Lawrence starting. What a marathon of a game that was. There was it felt like there was 300 plays in that game. It didn't end until about 4:40, and it didn't even go to overtime. You have Pittsburgh as the number 6 seed. They are 7-6. They're somehow still in the playoffs with that offense after losing to New England at home, and then Indianapolis also sitting at 7-6. They got crushed by a rising Cincinnati team, and Jake Browning seemingly playing very well, thrust into the starting spot. Moving on to the NFC, you do have San Francisco holding strong, beating Seattle at home. They're the number 1 overall seed. Dallas sitting at number 2. They are also 10-3. They got the huge win over Philadelphia, so they have the head-to-head right now over Philly. That pushes Philadelphia down to the number 5 seed, although Philadelphia has an extremely easy remaining schedule. You have Detroit as the number 3 overall seed sitting at 9-4. They just lost to Chicago. I thought they would lose, and they end up losing. Really leaky defense for the Lions. A lot of people starting to think the Lions are a little bit of pretenders. Maybe Jared Goff is not the answer. We will see. And then you do have Tampa Bay sitting with a losing record, but sitting as the number 4 seed, shockingly at 6-7, led by Baker Mayfield. Like I said, Philadelphia drops down to the number 5 seed. You do have Minnesota at 7-6. They won 3-0. The return of Justin Jefferson. He gets injured. He goes back to the locker room. What a weird game that was against Las Vegas. And then Green Bay playing tonight with a golden opportunity to move to 7-6 against a bad Giants team, although they are on the road there. Let's take a look at kind of the bigger picture. Playoff picture here. Teams in the hunt for the wild card spots. You can see Cleveland right now a little bit separating themselves, sitting at 8-5. In terms of the division, the Browns really don't have much of a chance considering Baltimore is already 10-3 and the Browns are without Nick Chubb, Deshaun Watson. They're missing a lot of their key players. It would be shocking if the Browns somehow caught Baltimore, so it looks like they're going to be a wild card team. Pittsburgh and Indianapolis. And you also do have, look at how many 7-6 teams there are right now in the NFL. Houston with that crazy loss. I guess the most important thing to look at is the next game and see who has the easiest chance of winning. So Cleveland faces Chicago at home, very winnable. But Chicago's been better of late. Justin Fields is playing really well. Pittsburgh at Indianapolis, that's going to be huge in determining a wild card spot, at least for the time being. I would expect Indianapolis to win that game, but who knows? You do have Houston traveling to Tennessee. That's a very winnable game, but Houston is coming off that bad loss to the Jets. Denver, they will go to Detroit in a non-conference game. They're also sitting at 7-6. Also, the conference record is very important in determining tiebreakers as well. That's something to look at. But Denver at Detroit, you would think that's possibly going to be a loss, although Detroit's playing worse. They're certainly not going to be favorites in that game. Cincinnati also at 7-6 versus Minnesota. Very winnable game based on how Minnesota's offense has been the past few weeks. Buffalo 7-6. They get the huge win over Kansas City. They're still in the playoff race. They've got a game versus Dallas, going to be very tough, but we know the offensive upside of Buffalo. If I had to predict right now, I do think Buffalo, even with a few tough games remaining, gets one of those final wild card spots. I also expect the Browns, considering they do have a one-game advantage right now and a great defense, to get one of those spots. And then the other spot, I would say, comes down to Houston or Denver. Still do like Jacksonville to win that division, even though there's only one game separating Jacksonville and Houston in the AFC South. And then you do have the Chargers right now. I mean, there's three teams that are almost out of it. You know, there's just too many teams in front of them. The Chargers at 5-8, Las Vegas coming off a shutout loss at 5-8, and then the Jets coming off an impressive win. They've got a great defense, but they are also 5-8. There's just too many teams to pass unless they won every game remaining, somehow got to 9-8 and got lucky. That's the only way those teams could make the playoffs. And then looking at the NFC, San Francisco and Dallas tied right now. You can see San Francisco has an advantage in the conference record over Dallas, but I'm sure Dallas is happy right now to at least, be leading their division. They're sitting at 10-3. Detroit sitting at 9-4 right now. Tampa Bay, like we talked about. Then you do have in the wild card Philadelphia. So Philadelphia very likely can still win that division, considering their remaining schedule. Their next game's actually at Seattle. That's probably their toughest remaining game in comparison to Dallas being at Buffalo. That's a very tough game for the Cowboys, traveling in a cold environment. You do have Minnesota sitting at 7-6 at Cincinnati. That's possibly a loss. Green Bay playing tonight at the Giants. You would think they win that, they stay, and they give themselves a one-game separation over the Rams, who just lost to Baltimore. They did put up a good fight, and they have a very winnable game coming up against the Commanders. Seattle also sitting. Look at all those teams at 6-7. My goodness. Seattle with a game at home against Philadelphia. That's very tough. That's a game they need to win, though. Atlanta, they're really fighting for that 4 seed with Tampa Bay, because both of them are 6-7, and so is New Orleans. So that's 3 teams in the same division sitting with a tied record at 6-7. Atlanta has a pretty easy game at Carolina, very winnable. New Orleans has a pretty easy game versus the Giants next week. That's very winnable. Tampa Bay at Green Bay, that's a little bit tougher. You could see one of those teams, Atlanta or New Orleans, take over the lead in the NFC South. And then you do also have Chicago all the way down at 5-8. They're playing better, but I would say a very little chance they make the playoffs, obviously. And then taking a look at the all-important draft pick standings right now, the Carolina Panthers, this is a major problem. Sitting at 1-12 right now. They are not trying to tank. This is just how bad they are. Bryce Young was 13 of 36 in his game, and it's not all his fault, but my goodness, is that terrible. They would have to give up a number 1 overall pick. They might finish with the worst record in the NFL and not even have a first-round pick. That is terrible. If you're Chicago, there's a lot of speculation now with Justin Fields playing better. Do you trade down? Do you just draft Marvin Harrison Jr.? I would guess if they decide to stick with Justin Fields, they would not trade down very far, maybe 1 or 2 spots to get Marvin Harrison Jr., and a quarterback needy team makes sure that they get Caleb Williams. You do have New England, even after that win against the Steelers on Thursday night, sitting with the number 2 overall pick right now in front of Arizona based on tiebreakers. The overall strength of schedule is weaker for New England, meaning they get a higher pick. And then you do have, how about Washington with the number 4 overall pick right now? That would be nice for them in front of the Giants. If I was a Giants fan, man, you still have a chance to get the number 2 overall pick. If you lose out, you can get the number 2 overall pick even after winning these last 2 games, because New England and Arizona are both teams that could win 1, maybe 2 more games. Washington, you would certainly expect to win at least 1 more game. Tennessee sitting at 4-8, I would expect them to win at least 1 more game. Chicago, they've already got the built-in number 1 pick. We'll just see where their other pick is. Las Vegas, the Jets, and then the Chargers rounding out the top 10 in terms of that. And then taking a look at the toughest strength of schedules remaining, Baltimore right now, the toughest remaining strength of schedule. I would still expect them to win the North based on the built-in advantage that they have, but they do have some very tough opponents. San Francisco, Miami, Jacksonville. I wouldn't necessarily call the Steelers a tough opponent, but they are over 500. Minnesota with a very tough remaining schedule. I do not think they're going to be a wild card team with that schedule remaining. Arizona with a very tough schedule. That could help them secure a top 3 pick. Washington with a very tough schedule, but also some winnable games versus the Jets and the Rams. Detroit sitting with a tough remaining schedule, as well as the Giants. That should help them tank a little bit in terms of that. And then taking a look at the easiest remaining schedules, it is Philadelphia. So for Philadelphia, this is where it sets up. You can still very easily win your division even after the loss to Dallas, considering the Cowboys have the 10th toughest remaining strength of schedule. Philadelphia, the easiest. They get Arizona, they get a tanking Giants team twice, and they get Seattle as well. Green Bay sitting as the second easiest remaining strength of schedule. They very likely could make the playoffs with Jordan Love as a wild card team. You do have Atlanta with an easy schedule. Maybe they win the NFC South just based off of how easy their schedule is. Kansas City, they very likely will win their division. It's not hard this year. And then Jacksonville as well. So that is just a playoff update here for the NFL as we enter week number 15. That's going to do it for this video, guys. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.